That's why we're called neighbors, because you get to store where you live.
Welcome to Gigging, Everything in the Sharing Economy, and I am your host, Mark Anthony Peterson. This is the podcast where CEOs, founders, market makers, and market leaders come to predict the future of the sharing, gig, and platform economies. Now that was Joseph Woodbury in the open, and that's who we have for you today. A fantastic interview with the co-founder and CEO of Neighbor, Joseph Woodbury. I think you're going to love this interview because we dig into what makes Neighbor great as a business, but also what it's going to do for the community and the environment. Here's my interview with Joseph Woodbury, co-founder and CEO of Neighbor. Welcome back to the podcast. We have another very fascinating show for you today. We have the CEO and co-founder of Neighbor, Joseph Woodbury. But let me tell you a little bit about Joseph before we jump in and start talking about his business. He was a business analyst for internal strategic projects, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a business analyst with Sorensen Capital Partners. He was associate consultant intern with Bain & Company, and he served as a Senate analyst for one of my favorite guys, Harry Reid. He is a graduate of Brigham Young University, where he got a BA in economics and a minor in strategy. Mr. Woodbury, thank you for coming on the podcast. We absolutely appreciate having you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Before we press on a little further and learn about your business, give us a little bit more about you, about your background, and what may have inspired you to become an entrepreneur and pursue this business.
Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty typical background. I did not plan to become an entrepreneur per se, but as I think frequently happens, a good idea comes along and kind of grabs you by the collar and says, you have to do this. It was actually my co-founder, Preston, who came up with the original idea for Neighbor. He had a small business, and one of his went down to South America to do a project for a client and needed a storage unit while he was going to be out of the country filming down there with him and his wife. Looked into getting a storage unit and just kind of had the same experience as everyone does. It was going to be insanely expensive, $200-$300 a month. He was going to have to drive a half hour across town to some industrial park, all to store in this, dirty, kind of dingy storage box. And he just thought, that's crazy. I'm not going to pay $200 or $300 a month for that. That's like a mini mortgage. So he ended up talking with some friends, found a friend with an empty garage that was willing to let him store his items in there for the summer. And when he got back and went to pick his items up, he just thought, wow, this was so much easier. I felt so much more peace of mind having my items in a nice, clean, safe garage. And I saved a lot of money. Why doesn't everyone do this? Surely everyone has to have someone in their neighborhood with excess space that they could connect with and then pay their neighbor instead. So that's kind of where the idea for Neighbor came. He pitched me on that idea, and I just thought, wow, what a great idea. Why has this not been done before? It immediately hooked me. We both called our full-time jobs and quit and went full-time on the project. So definitely had no intention of being an entrepreneur. Was happy to go the management consulting route. Really enjoyed the work I was doing there at Bain & Company, but so glad that Preston looped me into his great idea.
Necessity is the mother of invention, and it sounds like you walked right into a need that could be replicated across many different neighborhoods, many different countries. Tell us about those early days. So you had an idea that you thought could be turned into a business. What were those early days like in terms of testing that idea and starting to build a platform to see if you could replicate the experience that your co-founder had?
Yeah, it was very much a do things that don't scale experience. We have a third co-founder, Colton, who put up a very basic landing page where those that were interested could put in their email if they wanted to host some space or rent some space. And then we started signing up customers. We did all sorts of scrappy things, including like going door to door, knocking on people's doors and just asking them if they wanted to make some money off of their garage or their parking space or something like that. And then, when we would get interested renters, we would call up a host, ask them how much they wanted to charge, and then we'd call the renter. You couldn't do any of this through the early technology. We'd call the renter, see if they were okay with that price. We'd, keep calling back and forth until we had it all settled, and then we would have the renter pay us via Venmo. The renter would Venmo us, and then we would Venmo the host their portion. It was extremely manual, unscalable. Well, we started getting enough volume that we couldn't keep that up. And so of necessity, again, we started building into the website the capability for hosts and renters to find each other on the map. And that helped relieve some of the pressure, but very quickly, we knew we needed payments. And so then we built payments into the site to where it could securely handle those payments rather than having to go through us. And this was all in the first, just few months of the business. We were very aware of what our customers' needs were because we had to address those needs.
I like that. I like the fact that you started with a proof of concept, really, where you had a phrase from my past, squirrels in a cage, kind of working in the background, connecting customers to host and proving out the value proposition. Now, I heard you mention parking spaces in addition to garages. Tell us all the things that you host on the platform now that kind of fit your model of leveraging existing assets and space.
Yeah, and you put it really well. That is what neighbor.com is we take any sort of unused space. It could be an attic, a basement, a garage, a parking space, a shed. We've had warehouses on our platform. We've had barns on our platform. Just really any sort of space that is unused and could be repurposed, and we will rent that out. Now, certain types of space are going to command more of a premium, and that's kind of the beauty of a marketplace is you get so much variety that you start to get all these different price points. We have spaces on our platform that have 24/7 video surveillance, smart locks to allow you in, remote access, all these different things. And we have other spaces that it's as simple as the RV pad on the side of someone's house where you can go store your boat for the winter and everything in between. And every customer can come onto our website and instantly find exactly what they want rather than having to go drive across town and visit, 3 facilities and have them not have what you want. And then they want to charge you an arm and a leg. So it's much more, it gives much more optionality to the consumer.
I love that. So every square inch of a house or property now becomes a potential way for a host to monetize. A closet, as you say, a pad, a parking spot, a barn, which I find interesting. So that is interesting. In bringing those hosts on, what is your vetting process? And do you find yourself at any point scouting for particular types of usable property based on demand in that region?
Absolutely. Every single host has to go through a long sign-up flow. It is, we ask them lots of questions about their space, get very detailed information. That's all displayed very clearly for the renter to see. So the renter doesn't need to reserve a space and then ask questions about the space. the way we present it on our website is they have almost every piece of information about that space, and then they can reserve it. Also, we put our hosts through, ID verification and other sort of security measures to make sure they own the property, to make sure that they are who they say they are, or that they are the tenant of the property. They don't necessarily have to own the property. We do have people that are renting property and then renting that property out on Neighbor. So it's a very safe and secure platform. In fact, much safer than storage facilities. That's one thing we feel is a real travesty in the storage industry, is just because there's so much more demand than there is supply. The storage facilities don't really need to do much to cater to consumers. They know they'll fill their spaces. So if you don't like it, they'll just fill it with the next guy. So most facilities do not insure your items. Most facilities don't do any sort of surveillance or security at all. We provide $25,000 in insurance for everything that all of our consumers store. We don't know a single other storage company in the nation that does that. And many people have had unpleasant surprises in the storage industry where, a storage facility floods and they go to the front desk and they say, well, hey, are you going to replace my items? And the storage facility says, no, we don't. We just rented you a place. We're not liable for any of your items. That never happens on Neighbor. All of that is insured. Your items are protected with us. Plus, they're in a safer location. They're not in one of those industrial parks. They're in a neighborhood close to where you live. That's why we're called neighbors, because you get to store where you live. And people are very intentional about where they choose to live and who they want to live by. And we enable them to store with those people.
So let me unpack the insurance a little bit more. Is that two-sided? Does the host pick up any new insurance on a project-by-project basis, or are they required to have homeowners insurance that will cover this sort of transaction? And then on the renter side, are they getting a unique transactional-based insurance based on the value of the projects? If you could unpack that a little bit more for the audience, because I think people will find this business fascinating and want to use it. And that may be that one concern they have is around the security of their items and how they get it replaced if there is some damage.
Sure. First of all, let me say we were very lucky as a business to come after, some pioneers in the sharing economy like Airbnb, like Uber, that dealt with very similar problems. And quite frankly, those are businesses that deal with a lot more liability than we'll ever have to deal with. When you talk about Uber, this is basically the idea of I fly to Chicago and I get in a car with someone I've never met in my life before. You literally are talking about human liability, which is much greater. We just deal with the liability of, someone storing their Christmas tree in your attic, right? So we followed a very similar playbook and then expanded upon it. So for our hosts, you asked about our hosts. That's actually separate from our $25,000 renter guarantee. Our hosts, we have $1 million liability guarantee, very similar to Airbnb's $1 million host guarantee, because the host is essentially a business owner, right? They are operating a business. And so that $1 million liability protects them if anything were to happen as part of like running that business. Back to the renter policy. The renter policy is specifically for the items stored. And that is a blanket policy. You don't need to sign up for anything specific when you onboard onto the site. Rather, you are covered and there's no additional charge for that. We, as far as we understand, we're the first major marketplace to provide, a unique two-sided policy like this. Most marketplaces in the past have only had to cover one side of the marketplace. Uber covers the drivers, Airbnb covers their hosts, but they don't cover the renter. Likewise, Uber doesn't cover the rider. But we cover both our host and our renter with unique protections.
That is unusual. And I think that gives you a unique market position when you can provide that type of security and a safety net for both sides of the marketplace. You mentioned this safety net and how it opens up these types of opportunities. Are small businesses a part of the target set that you focus on as well? You know, we have residential customers who have space, but a lot of small businesses, particularly today during the pandemic, may have a lot of open space that they could put on the market and earn some additional revenue, given the fact that they can't have very many people in their businesses these days.
Absolutely. Again, our mission is just to find unused space and repurpose it more efficiently. We hate the idea that we spend $5 billion a year just building new self-storage facilities. That's so much capital that could go elsewhere. We take all types of unused space. So we have, I'll give you an example. We had a gym owner in LA. Of course, no one can visit his gym during COVID. So he's losing money. He's still got to pay the lease on the building, et cetera, with no revenue. He listed some space in that gym, some parking spots around his gym on our platform. 2 months later, he's making $50,000 a year just off of Neighbor. We have office buildings in San Francisco where the building owners, again, people are no longer leasing office space, and so they need to replace that income somehow. We had one of the WeWork buildings there in San Francisco, for example, converted an entire floor into storage and rented out on Neighbor. A month and a half later, they're 85% occupied, which is insanely fast. You know, storage facilities take 2 to 3 years to lease up to full occupancy. And because of the way our platform works to aggregate demand, we were able to lease up entirely in a month and a half. Spaces like this all around the country, airport parking companies that used to run very vibrant, kind of park and jet businesses. No one is going to the airport anymore. So we have filled their spaces. There's so much commercial opportunity here in addition to the residential. Residential is definitely at the core of what we do. It will always be kind of our bread and butter, but this commercial space is huge and growing as well.
Yeah. We just recently had Rob Brown, CEO of Curb, on the podcast, and he talked about this shift in the commercial space and those opportunities. Let's dig in a little bit more on your parking. You mentioned airport parking and some of the other office space that you now see as opportunities. Let's unpack that parking. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that opportunity is emerging? Because you're right. If no one's going to the airport, that's a lot of extra space. If people aren't coming to the office as they used to on a daily basis, there's a lot of open space. Are you seeing those as opportunities now?
Absolutely. And I could talk about this, for the entire podcast. We're opening up there's a retail space in Brooklyn that, just like you're saying, is no longer making any money. No one is visiting. We're converting that entire retail space into storage, and we'll be renting that out to people in Brooklyn, and people in Brooklyn need it. There's kind of an interesting dynamic. You mentioned commercial space. Commercial, as far as we define it, includes hospitality, retail, office space, self-storage. And when you look at all those categories within commercial real estate, self-storage has been the fastest growing category for 4 decades straight. So just very, very fast growing market. And we can take some of that demand and we can give it to the other categories of commercial real estate that are struggling with demand. Even during COVID, our demand is up during COVID. Self-storage demand has only increased for us because everyone is moving right now. They need a place to get a storage unit. You take like a New York or a San Francisco, for example, and almost every single storage unit in the entire city is completely booked. Already the nationwide average occupancy is 93% in storage facilities. The storage facilities are so full. And so you add a pandemic on top of that, and especially in these big cities, you get to 100% occupancy really quickly. And then what do those customers do? Where do they go to find space? Mm-hmm. Well, we can roll into these cities during a time of crucial need, and we can unlock a lot of space really quickly. We already on our platform, the square footage that we have on our platform today would cost a traditional self-storage facility billions of dollars to build if they were going to to build that square footage. We, of course, didn't have to pay for or build that square footage. We just unlocked it.
There's a phrase my grandmother used to use called getting blood out of a turnip. And you have essentially done that with every major city by unlocking these unused or underutilized spaces that now can be monetized for different market segments. With so many different channels or methods for you to make money, who do you view as your primary competitors in this space?
Well, this industry is massive. People don't really conceptualize the size of the storage industry. It does about $40 billion a year in annual revenue. For context, that's the entire taxi and limo industry that Uber and Lyft disrupted was doing about $10 billion a year in annual revenue before they disrupted it. So we're talking, an industry that's 4 times the size of the industry that Uber and Lyft disrupted. Even still, it's hard to conceptualize how big is that. One thing I'll tell people sometimes is that there are more storage facility locations in the United States today than McDonald's, Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, Burger King's, Wendy's, Domino's Pizzas, Walmart's, Home Depot's, and Costco's combined. That's how much storage we've built. So that's the first thing I'll say. And the reason I mention that is because we can come in and provide a solution. And this industry is growing so fast and it's so big that in a way, almost no one is competing with each other. We're all just servicing all of the demand. When you're at 100% occupancy in all these storage facilities, there's still a lot of demand out there. And just by unlocking new space, we can fill that without competing with anyone. With that being said, of course, we compete with the traditional self-storage players. We're providing a much better service. Our cost, our storage is half the cost of a traditional facility. That's, for the average consumer, that's $2,000 a year just by switching from a storage facility to a neighbor. You're going to save $2,000 a year, which is really good money. I mean, we just got the stimulus checks. You basically get a stimulus check every year just by switching to neighbor. It's much closer to your home. It's much safer. It's insured. And there's a technology solution to keep track of and access your storage. So it's just much more convenient in a lot of ways. And we see ourselves as competitors with all of them.
Uber and Lyft found themselves in the middle of a lot of regulatory pushback as they disrupted the taxi and limo industry. Are you experiencing any of that from the self-storage traditional players? Because I would imagine you come into town, you're giving value to the host, you're giving value to the renters, you're coming in at a price point that they may not want to match. Certainly they can't provide the same type of service that you're providing at this point. Their next move is, let's go see if we can slow you down from a regulatory perspective. Have you experienced that, and what has been kind of the reaction or the playbook that they've used?
Yeah, definitely. First, I'll say it's much more difficult for them to do that in this industry. Hospitality, transportation, these are industries that are highly regulated because, once again, they're dealing with people. We like to say Airbnb is in the business of they handle storage of people. We handle storage of goods. Same with Uber, they're transporting people. And so whenever you're dealing with people and people's safety, you have highly regulated industries like transportation, like hospitality. Storage is a very, very unregulated industry in that way. There's almost no regulation. And in many ways, because of our technology solution, we're more enabled to comply with that regulation than a traditional self-storage facility. We can have a centralized customer success team and handle, the experience of customers, making sure they're having a satisfied experience across a lot of geographies much more easily. We have seen a little bit of pushback. We've seen some storage lobbyists and show up at legislatures and bring us up, but almost universally the reaction from the legislative side has been like, what are they doing? They're complying better than you guys are. So it's because because there's so much less regulation in this industry, and because we're just such a good product for the consumer, it's very hard to take that angle without hurting themselves as a business.
Right now, you may not have to contemplate this, as you said, because there are so many opportunities to utilize existing space. But do you see some point in the future, neighbor ever having to build facilities, storage facilities in the same vein as what Airbnb has had to do in terms of buying or partnering to manage certain properties in high growth markets?
So we have now built 2.7 billion square feet of traditional self-storage. That's enough space to simultaneously house every man, woman, and child in the United States. We could all, at the same moment, go stand in a storage facility and we would fit comfortably. We'd be able to spread our arms out. That's how much storage we've built. We think that's a little bit of a travesty, and we don't want to have to build any additional space. I just watched an interview with Bill Gates. He was talking about his environmental initiatives. And he mentioned that he feels that the biggest unsolved environmental problem that we face as a society today is the production of concrete and steel, and the emissions resulting from the production of concrete and steel. And when I hear that, I instantly think, oh my gosh, concrete and steel, that's basically all a storage facility is. It's just concrete and steel. And we're building $5 billion worth of it every single year. What if we could get more efficient as a society and never build another square foot of storage again? What if we can just allocate it better? We're pretty terrible at allocation. There's a lot of people, and this is no fault of their own. It's just what's available when. There's a lot of people in homes that are much too big for them. But they bought that home because the smaller, more affordable home wasn't available when they were searching for a home. And then there's other people who, needed that larger home, but it wasn't available in the neighborhood they were looking in at the time. And so they ended up packed into a smaller home. And what did they do? Of course, they got a storage facility, right? They got a storage unit to house some of those excess goods that weren't fitting in their home. And we have this mismatch all over the country. 1 in 10 Americans is now locked into a storage contract. But that also means that 9 in 10 Americans is not locked into a storage contract. And we can take those two groups together and combine them. And we can make it so that person that got a house that's way too big for them, we can help them pay the mortgage on that house because the house is going to be expensive. We have people paying 30, 40, 50% of their mortgage through their neighbor payments every single month. And then the person that lives 2 doors down from them that's storing with them, it's cheaper storage, it's closer and more accessible, and it's with someone they trust. So it just, why should we ever build another square foot of storage again? Let's just help each other out as good neighbors.
Yeah, I agree with you. And trying to leverage what we have so that we minimize the future environmental impact is dear to my heart. It's one of the reasons how I ended up being so passionate about the gig sharing and platform economy, because it gives us the opportunity to create value without having to create new assets. And that's just, to me, smart. Unfortunately, this country, we've always had more land. We've always had more room. And so we just kept building without thinking about ways to make the processes, our lifestyles as efficient as they could be. And unfortunately, I think we've kind of caught up with that. Sure. We had some early pioneers. The Ford Motor Company, they started out taking excess wood from the Model Ts and making charcoal and use that money to pay their people more. And then they reused the chemicals that they took out of the wood when they made those briquettes, those charcoal. So they were early pioneers, but most of the industrialists didn't follow that method of squeezing everything they can out of every asset or every process that they were involved in. In thinking about your business, I often wondered, what if people who stored their assets would also open them up to be used while they're in storage? And, to that same vein of getting the absolute most. If I stored my lawnmower or my lawn equipment with a neighbor, what if that equipment could be used and I get even more revenue. I get revenue as a renter every time it's used.
Yeah.
Is that ever come up in your kind of strategic thinking down the road, the 4 to 5 years down the road, is once I have this stuff stored, instead of letting it sit there, is it possible to monetize the assets?
It absolutely has. It's a fascinating idea. I think it's an idea that works. Strategically, how we think about it is we want to, well, first, it's obviously a very hairy problem logistically. It's a massive, massive logistical problem to try and take those items and distribute them out. So we're very focused on our primary goal right now, and that is to become the best, absolute best. Like, we want to be head and shoulders above, where it's not even a comparison anymore, the absolute best storage solution for every single American. That is goal number one. As soon as we feel like we've accomplished that goal, absolutely, we're going to start branching out and start to look for other areas of efficiency and how we can earn our hosts more money and save our renters more money. And that's a great example. There are others as well, including moving services, et cetera.
Right. Now, you're doing other things that are quite unique, like allowing your renters to set their own prices. Was that something you did intentionally to help you solve the chicken and egg problem in getting people on the platform? Or was there some other strategic reason to give them that much control over pricing without some sort of framework?
Yeah, we do allow our hosts to set their own prices, and that's because we value our hosts, we trust them, and we trust their abilities as business owners if they want to take a bet one way or the other. With that said, we provide them with a very structured recommendation that's based off of a national database. And when you're signing up for a space as a host and you give us the important details like the address of the space, its location is going to affect its price. The square footage is going to affect its price. The security amenities are going to, and the access you're willing to provide will affect the price. We take all that information, we crunch it through our algorithm, and we will spit you out a price, and we will say, hey, you're 90% more likely to be rented if you choose this price. But if you think you're smarter than the algorithm and you want to price it higher, or if you want to get rented faster, price it lower than that, then we see no reason why we as a platform should create some sort of constraining rule against that. Ultimately, markets set the best prices, and that's what we want to preserve, is kind of an open market with some guidance, because a lot of our hosts are like, I have no idea what I should price this space at. Like, help me out. So we do provide that guidance.
What about the length of the contract? As the traditional players try to lock you in and have a certain period of time that your items will be stored. Help the audience understand how your bookings work.
We do not. Our storage is month to month. You can cancel anytime. We do not try to lock you in. We handle all of the payments for that, so you can feel very secure. We use the same payment processor as Amazon, Google, Target, etc. So it's very, very secure. And unlike a storage facility where you have to worry about writing them a check, or even some of them will process your credit card, but they keep your credit card in some Excel spreadsheet, which is just crazy to us. All you have to do is insert your credit card. We will run it every single month. It's almost set it and forget it. We try to create a process that's as easy as possible for the consumer, because they already have more things to worry about. And usually when you're getting storage, it's kind of a stressful time. Storage is not usually on someone's agenda of things they're looking forward to do. You're moving, or you just got a new job in a new city and you need storage, or you're building a house and you need storage while your house is being built, or something like that. Something else is happening in your life that's very important. And the last thing you want to do is have a stressful experience with storage. And so that's why we built this seamless payment experience. And we don't pay the host until the full month is rendered. and so that you know that the host has provided good service.
We have a lot of senior executives, a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to the podcast. As a CEO, and you're now beyond just the proof of concept stage, how do you spend your day now? What is the makeup of your day, your week, in trying to drive this business forward so that these entrepreneurs who are now thinking about launching their platforms can get a sense of how a leader like yourself succeeds in building a business like this?
Yeah. Well, first I'll say, like any startup, I still do a lot of very nitty-gritty day-to-day tasks. I think that's important for a startup culture, is for everyone to be kind of in the grind. And so a decent portion of my day is spent doing that. But you're right that over time, as we grow, we've got users in all 50 states at this point. It becomes very much about hiring people that are better than you are at what they do, right? So we built out a phenomenal executive team, and each one of those people is someone that I can trust. Like I don't even have to question them. They almost always make the right decision, and when they don't, it was a risk worth taking. And they're all specialists in what they do. Our head of engineering has a long track record building excellent products, scalable products, that can handle millions and millions of users. Our head of growth, came to us. He was running growth for a $5 billion marketplace. So he knows how to acquire customers and help them see the value in a product very clearly and have a good experience as they onboard. So we've gone and hired these specialists that know what they're doing. Our head of support was the global head of support for a decacorn before. Had 100 people reporting up to her in her department. Now coming to this small startup, she's phenomenal at what she does in building out our national support organization. So much of what I do is trying to make sure they have the resources they need. They have the answers they need. They have the coordination that they need. We're a very collaborative organization. But I still, as I mentioned, try to spend a decent portion of my day doing, I still manage some of our core HR functions. We haven't hired or outsourced that. Some of our core finance functions as well. And I try to be an expert as well in each of the areas that my department heads are in, so that if I'm talking to one about SEO, I can talk intelligently about that and provide value to the conversation.
Knowing what you know now, and given the position that the company is in, if you could go back to the beginning, what would you do different?
Nothing, because I'd want to make sure we'd end up right where we're at. But oh man, we've made so many mistakes, just an endless list of mistakes.
What's the biggest? What's the biggest that's caused you to have your worst day?
Yeah, my worst day. So first of all, I think it's good to have a culture where mistakes are encouraged, right? So we talk about A/B testing everything, and we A/B test almost everything that we push out to our product. And when you A/B test something, you're going to have one winner and you're going to have one loser every single time, right? And so one version that you've now built two versions. One version will be a mistake every single time. And accepting and embracing that, I think, is really healthy, because it allows you to quickly optimize and move forward and achieve what's best for the consumer. Most of what I'd say are big things I would have changed is around hiring. Hiring the right person earlier, not waiting. But with that being said, I'm also really happy we took an approach of not hiring too early, and always being scrappy and waiting until we absolutely needed someone to bring them in. So that's a balance as well. Also, some of our biggest wins have been from keeping that hiring bar really high. We had one candidate, for example, we were looking to fill a position, and it was an important technical position, and we interviewed and we interviewed and interviewed, and we needed the position filled, 2 weeks ago at the time. And 6 months later, we were still interviewing for the position. We'd interviewed, 55 candidates. And I'm so glad we did that. And we didn't, just lower the bar and throw in the towel and say, okay, we'll take this candidate, even though they don't meet our standards. I'm so grateful because the candidate we did end up hiring has been a phenomenal value add. And I'm so glad we kept searching until we found the best. That is our first core value at Neighbor, is to hire and develop the best.
We're talking with Joseph Woodbury, the co-founder and CEO of Neighbor. Joseph, give us an outlook of what you think Neighbor's going to look like 3 years from now. We're going to hopefully get past this COVID and people are going to resume their lives. What is your business going to look like 3 years out?
Yeah, right now we're kind of in our growth phase. And so it's going to look like a lot of expansion. We're launching cities frequently. We're moving to new locations, and those locations are starting to mature. When we first roll into a location organically, we have a lot of people find us organically before we even launch in a city. So when we roll into a city, we may have 50, 100 users in that city already. But especially for these major cities, we want to get that to thousands of users in that location, so that when a renter gets on, they see 5 options in their neighborhood right close by. And we have several markets that look like that now, where if you go on, you have more options than you need. You're literally like, oh my gosh, do I choose that house that's 3 doors down, or I choose that house that's 3 doors down? One's a little bit more expensive, but one's got a better space, and it really starts to create this good marketplace experience where you have so many options as a customer. And that's what we want to create in all 50 states. So three years from now, I'm optimistic that that's what will look like in all 50 states. I wouldn't be surprised if we're getting close to being one of the largest storage players in the nation.
Your host acquisition cost, are you having to spend to solve that chicken and egg in those cities, or are you getting that organic word of mouth? You said you have users, but are the hosts seeking you out as well in some of these cities ahead of time? And just as we peel that out, if you can also speak to your chicken and egg and how your acquisition costs are driven on either side of that marketplace.
Yeah. So we've got hosts in all 50 states at this point, and we've never spent dollars in most of those states.
Wow.
So people they're hearing about us, they're reading about us in news articles, their friends, are telling them about it. When you find a platform like this that earns money, it's something you share. We talk about disrupting the storage industry, but we're also kind of disrupting the sharing economy. We're the first truly passive sharing economy option. You think about Uber, like you got to go drive around. It's work. It's good money, but it's work. Instacart, DoorDash, work, right? Even Airbnb, it's high turnover, right? You get someone, they stay for a day, and then you have to clean up after them, and then you have to find a customer for the next day. And then you have to find a customer for the next day. And it's constant interaction. Some people hire management companies just to manage their Airbnb. Neighbor is the first platform that we know of where you can rent out your garage. Someone comes and puts their boat in your garage in August, September, and you don't see them again until the next June. So literally no work, no interaction. You're just getting a direct deposit every single month straight into your bank account. And that type of money, that type of income that's truly passive, it's something that you want to tell your neighbor about so that they can start earning money as well.
Are you using any technology to make it contactless? In that boat example that you just mentioned, are there sharing of the garage codes, or what's been your approach to technology in terms of managing those touch points?
Yes. So as I mentioned, there's a high degree of variability on the platform. So it very much depends on the space. You have some spaces where the space is fully outfitted with smart locks. The host gives the renter a code. They can access the space 24/7 whenever they want, that sort of thing. We also have spaces where the host selects the option when they're signing up that the renter cannot access the space frequently. They can't let themselves in. They have to reach out to the host 48 hours or more in advance and set up an appointment to come by. They'll let them into the space. And then we have everything. Those are the two ends of the spectrum, and we have everything in between.
Joseph, I think I want to sign up for this platform. That passive income sounds really, really good. A great way to help build up a little nest egg here. Tell the audience how they can find out more. I'm going to go and sign up because I definitely got some space I can make available. How can our audience find out how to participate, both as a renter or as a host, and then how can they follow you?
Well, we try to make that piece easy as well. So if you have an iPhone and you pull up the App Store and you type in self-storage, we're the number one ranked self-storage app in the country. So we'll come up first no matter what. And then our website's just neighbor.com. So very easy to locate, very easy to find. I'm not really worth following, but I've got channels like Twitter. But follow Neighbor because we have a strong vision for helping neighbors connect again and actually have physical interactions with each other. We have so many stories of users that we've lived next to each other on the platform. We've lived next to each other for 5 years and we've never said more than hi while we were headed to work or something like that. And then I rented their space on Neighbor and I had to take my items over there. And they met me. They helped me move my items into their garage. We started talking and we realized we had some things in common. It formed a relationship. And that's one thing we love about our platform is we're the first hyper-local marketplace. It's not a destination. It's not like Airbnb where you go stay in an Airbnb in Thailand and then you never talk again. We're literally connecting people in neighborhoods, and those relationships can end up being long-term and lasting, and they can help reconnect our communities that have gotten so disparate.
We've just had a fascinating interview with Joseph Woodbury, the co-founder and CEO of Neighbor. And you find the Neighbor app and all the information about it at neighbor.com. We will make sure we put all these links in the show notes so that you, like me, can get some of that passive income that he spoke of. Joseph, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and giving us everything we need to know about the storage industry, but more importantly, helping us to understand more about your business and how you're creating value and making good neighbors out of all of us, because it helps us get to know each other better and it helps us to keep our environment intact by not having to put more concrete and steel in the ground. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
I want to thank Joseph Woodbury for coming on the podcast. What a fantastic interview. During the interview, Joseph mentioned insurance and that they provided both for the host and their customers. Well, guess who I'm interviewing next? Avi Monaim, the CEO of Demandu. They're one of the leading companies providing insurance for gig companies like Joseph Woodbury's Neighbor. Wow, that's going to be a fun interview, and you're going to learn a lot more about how the sharing gig and platform economies are evolving and really becoming the mainstream economy. Guys, if you like gigging everything in the sharing economy, you may like one of my other podcasts, Gorillapreneur, The Art of Waging Small Business Warfare. Guys, we have some exciting shows that we posted over there. You got to go listen to the show with Dahl Evant. She's coming up with the genome for water globally, and she's based right here in Atlanta, Georgia. Or what about Perla Humphrey? Her startup, Edify Us, is going to help save a lot of small businesses, particularly restaurants. Go listen to that interview and learn how she's going to single-handedly save small businesses. You got to check out Gorillapreneur, because each of those guys are Gorillapreneurs, and they're Davids taking on Goliaths. And if you like that, that's the podcast for you. Career coaching X's and O's. Some of you don't want to be entrepreneurs. You may listen to podcasts about them, but you got your eyes squarely focused on that corner office. Yeah, you want to be the CEO. Well, I have 20 plus years as a senior executive with Fortune 500 companies, and I'm giving you the guidance that's going to help you get that corner office. If that's what you need, Career Coaching X's and O's is for you. And by the way, Career Coaching X's and O's was rated as one of the top 15 coaching podcasts in the United States. Not bad. Guys, that's a lot of great content. And if you appreciate it, please help us by subscribing, sharing, commenting, and liking. That helps us get around those pesky algorithms and bumps us up in the ratings. You know what we say at the end of each one of these podcasts. You better get disrupting, or you might start dying. Till next time, guys, peace.